Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with the best political team on television from a very, very Auckland perspective. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on my revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers. She is a former National Party candidate and current talkback host on Māori radio, the ever wonderful Claudette Hoiti. And he is a life member of the Devonport Militia, speechwriter, tweeter, and militant cyclist David Slack. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, issue 1. Has National underestimated smaller class sizes, and will they back down? Issue 2. Stopping abusers and killers from having babies, child protection, or divisive Benny bashing for political gain? Issue 3. The Greens hold their party conference in the weekend. What are the challenges facing them from taking a serious role in any government post-2014? Plus, we'll end the show on a final word. But let's kick things off tonight with issue 1. The opposition to larger class sizes has created an unseen-before united front between the NZEI, NZAIMS, NZSTA, PPTA, NZPF, SPANZ and the PPTA Secondary Principals Council, while the Education Minister's performance has been woeful and the government seem to have no political management over the issue whatsoever. Claudette, has National bitten off more than they can chew here?
You know, really interesting in that long list of, NZs. Where in that list were the parents? Where in that list were schools? Where in that list were teachers? Where in that list was families? What I would like to know is I want to know what the discussion, where the discussion is around the word quality. So when the minister says it's about quality teaching, I want to know what that means. I want to know what the definition is of that. I want to know what that, what impact that will have on my kids' teaching and on my kids' learning, and why then that where you will see an increase in 1 or 2 kids per class. And let's be real here. When you're talking to real teachers at real schools, they're not saying that the class size is going to go up to 40 or 50 kids and squeezed in like sardines. You might see the class size is going up to 27, 29, absolutely. They might go up to 33, but in other classes in that same school in that same year, they might go down to 15 to 20. It depends on the principal and on the Board of Trustees how that configuration works out. But I want to know what do they mean by quality? I want to know that 20% of the tail, whether or not that 20% is going to be in that 80%, will be in that 80% that's actually succeeding.
For a cost saving of $43 million, if I can put it even more bluntly then, for only $43 million savings, have National bitten off more than they can chew?
Look, I want to go back to the basics, as all good teachers should do, go back to the basics. What does this mean in terms of real outcomes for our kids in the classrooms, and considering that 53% of our Māori boys are in that 20% of that tail that are failing.
And the system's failing them, right? The system's failing them.
Absolutely right. So will we see a progress and development of our tamariki Māori, particularly our boys, progress and develop?
David, isn't the problem for National that the theoretical argument over quality teachers evaporates when confronted with the reality of larger classroom sizes? Nothing Heki can say about quality confronts that reality for most parents, does it?
No, that's dead right, and that's why so many other policies have been able to sail along without much objection, because people don't perceive it to apply to them, and they're actually quite pleased to see other people being told off, beaten up, pushed to the side, made to work.
Right.
Now suddenly this actually affects them and they realise, holy hell, don't like the look of this. And we are now talking about smaller numbers, but to begin with we were talking about possibly 7 or 8 teachers disappearing from an intermediate school. Now that's a big deal. And there's a larger question here that I think you have to consider before you start talking about the particular policy, and that's this. A generation ago, maybe 2 generations ago, relatively speaking, teachers were pretty well paid.
Okay.
And there were fewer other career options, particularly for women. So the pool of people you were getting as teachers was much bigger and much better. Your quality of teaching was much better because of it, because you paid them what it was worth.
Right.
Now, what you're trying to do here is say, even though we're not paying teachers what it's worth and our pool is poor, we're going to pretend that we can fix all this just by having some kind of performance pay arrangement, even though they don't use those words, and hope it'll all be better. Well, it won't. It won't be better until you actually have the thing appealing enough for the right people to be coming in to start with. And if you're spending the kind of money that we once did on education, which means that you don't have to worry about whether the school, the class size is 27 or 29, and good luck with that too.
Right.
I've seen them in 30, 32, 34, and unless we're prepared to put a hell of a lot more money into education, we're going to go on having these problems, and if they think that this is going to make any real difference, they're dreaming.
Claudette, inland
Well,
revenue...
I want to pick up, about the quality. David had talked about the quality of the teacher 20 years ago. Did you say 20 or whatever it was, a while ago? The quality of the teacher was different than the quality of the teacher today. Is that what...
I'm saying that there was
I'm
a
not
wider
sure
pull,
that that's quite
and I
correct,
don't think we have as good a general quality of teachers today as we did a generation or two ago.
I'm not quite sure that that's actually correct, because I was a school teacher 20 years ago, and the quality of the teachers when I was there is the same quality of individual that we see in schools today. But
you think
what
they're
I
paid
think,
accordingly? You think they're paid accordingly?
But what I
for
think teachers today would are asking for is the ability to upskill and to develop their skill in the classroom, because things are changing, the environment is changing. So I think when we're talking about quality, yes, there might be some discussion around the quality of the individual that is working in the classroom, but mainly I think we're talking about the quality of the teaching and the quality of learning of the children.
Inland Revenue and Treasury were the only ones who reviewed this. And when quizzed on which schools would lose how many teachers, Hekia couldn't answer. Is it the problem for National complete political mismanagement here?
Well, I think this is a really good opportunity to go back and have a look at those figures. Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. And in South Auckland, there's an intermediate school that will lose 6.5 teachers. What they mean by ratios. One teacher for 27, 29, years 7 and 8, but a school in South Auckland with a roll of around 800 will lose about 6.5 teachers, because once you get to 120 pupils, you then get an additional teacher. And those additional teachers are usually in the areas like tech, very important remedial reading as well too, and the arts, and those sectors that are actually quite crucial in South Auckland. So yes, in the wash up of the figures, those are the things that need to be addressed.
So why was Treasury and only bloody Inland Revenue the ones reviewing something as political dynamite as this? Surely there should have been a better political management.
Well, you should ask them that. But what I do believe now is it's a great opportunity to go back to the board and explain to the parents and the families exactly how this is going to impact on them.
Hekia has been left high and dry by this. Was she set up?
This is not going to define that woman. This woman, in Māori terms, has an extraordinary whakapapa that go back to great Ngāti Porou leaders. This will not define her.
David, 43 students arrested last week for education protests. 2 questions. Was the police action there heavy-handed? And will these tactics cause larger protests in education?
Oh, I don't think in the scheme of things that it was that different from any other protest and any other police action. I don't think you're going to get some kind of long-term reaction because of that. Does it lead to further? Well, the fact that it's now harder to contemplate doing post-grad study or any study past 4 years has got to leave people saying, what are my choices here? And either going somewhere else and further compounding our brain drain problem, or simply not doing what's necessary for us to have more skilled people. The short-sightedness of all of this is really disappointing, because it's nickel and diming and ignoring larger structural problems that need to be fixed. Look, in the budget, they talked about the idea of good debt and all debt as being bad debt. Not all bad debt is bad. It's good debt if you borrow it to put it into R&D, if you put it into education. We need to be putting a hell of a lot more into that, because that's the only way we're going to transform our economy and be the kind of high-value economy that makes it possible for us to pay for all of these things that we need.
Final question to both of you. Will National back down on creating larger classroom sizes? They've got to, don't they? 80% of people against the idea. Going to back down?
Well, it depends on what you mean by larger class sizes then.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
lose
because in some
two
schools-
extra kids a classroom.
Well, you know, there is that.
Yeah.
So that really isn't going to make a huge impact on the learning of a child if you have 1 or 2 extra children. But given that, in the same school,
Yeah.
you might also have classroom sizes that are around 15.
Right.
So it depends on the school, it depends on the principal. So when you're talking about large class sizes, in the one school, you've got to take them in context, what is happening in individual schools.
Well,
I've
back
just
down?
got to say that I've been a parent
Yep.
watching the state of our primary schools over the last decade, and I've been really, really bloody disappointed in the capability of the teaching
Yep.
and the attention the individual kids get. And I just don't think it's good enough, and I think our kids deserve better.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 2. So, as government policy becomes increasingly more unpopular, Paula Bennett decides to opine on Michael Law's Talk Hate radio show the idea that to protect the children, the government should be able to, via court order, decide child abusers and child killers are non-breeders and will have their children taken off them at birth. Is this child protection or the lowest form of dog whistle politics? Claudette, as a National Party candidate, versed in the philosophy of the rights of the individual, you of course will be horrified by this idea of allowing the state to declare certain types of people are not allowed to have children. When will you be protesting this outrageous nanny state on meth?
Interestingly, I was listening to Talkback Radio on my way into this great program.
Yes.
And on Talkback Radio, one particular Talkback host who is in your centre-left
Yes,
camp,
yes. Well, it depends on who that is. It
sometimes-
depends on who that
sometimes,
is.
had said that this kind of issue, you
Yep.
know, sterilisation, blah, blah,
The intervention, yep.
is actually where you find it, you find that in communist states.
Yes, yes. Well,
So that would be something that you mean a socialist yourself. And
Oh, right.
Is
Is this, I was wondering where the long bow was going there,
Yeah,
Claudette.
this would
Okay.
be something that you would.
Are you horrified that the state is stepping into the individual's right to procreate?
Oh,
or
look,
this is something that
we
you think is necessary?
already have laws in place.
Yep, yep.
We have laws in place that look at this anyway,
Mm.
that take care of this. And what I think Paula has, the Minister has done, she has been asked a question, and so she has talked about removing children from unfit parents and
Yep.
individuals. So she's actually talking about something that is already there.
David, this is the most despicable type of dog whistle politics, isn't it? Last year, exactly as Claudette pointed out, SIFS removed 148 babies within days of an at-risk mother giving birth. The systems exist and are in place. Can we honestly legislate for the exceptions to the rule that bypass the current evaluations of at-risk mums for outright bans on some women? Because that's where this legislation's going.
Yeah, well, the risk you take with doing this kind of thing is that you set the state up to be something less than the fair dealer that everybody has faith in, and more the one that makes judgments in a way that is quite dangerous. I think it's much safer to use the system we have already than to set yourself up for something that potentially takes you down a path of eugenics. And God knows in the 20th century we saw where that took us to camps and spectacles of horror. I just don't think she's inclined to think these things carefully. I think Claudette's right, she was talking to Michael Laws, who loves this whole idea of sterilising the ferals, but I'm not sure he believes a single thing he says. My fear is that she may actually believe some of this stuff because she seems to have this tendency to ask for policy that can be condensed to a single page with Venn diagrams, and this is the kind of trouble you get into when you're thinking that simplistically.
Should the state have that kind of power to decide that someone shouldn't be able to breed?
Well, I'd prefer it didn't. Or rather, it possesses that power. I prefer it didn't exercise it. I'd prefer it uses SIFS to judge a family and figure out when to intervene. But more importantly, I'd like to see it using its power to run its whole social welfare system, so that it's got good case managers, it's got sufficient resources to be taking care of broken families and fixing them. Because any time you find an example like this of somebody who's been abusing, you'll be able, you can, with the very rare psychopathic exception, you can track it back to some kind of background that was lousy for them, and that needed to have been fixed in the first place. And the sooner you mend all of that, the sooner these problems diminish.
Claudette, as a woman, do you feel comfortable with the idea that the state would be able to come in and have this level of power over another woman's body? And what's your position if
what
the,
do you mean
if the
over a
abuser...
woman's body? You're talking about sterilisation, aren't you?
Well, no, well, they'd be able to say that you can't keep your child, we'll take the child off you at birth.
Well,
I mean, and what if the abuser is a male?
Well, the law at the moment states that they can do that if that person, that individual has been a recidivist.
Well, if they've been judged by SIFs, that they can't look after the child.
And I do believe that we need to have a level of trust in SIFs, in the organisations that work with these families, because they would be the front line, or they would know better than us. There's also whānau ora as well too. There are very capable Māori programs that are working with our whānau. Te Kahui Manaririki is another organisation that's rolling out very good, you know, tikanga Māori programs as well too, with families at risk that they've identified. And I think that I would like to give them a level of trust.
Over and above a court?
I think that that is the last, that's the last point of call, and I think that it has always been the last point of call.
And what if the abuser is a male? I mean, isn't this all fairly one-sided on the woman?
Well, of course, then Minister Bennett had said that the policy will stretch to include males working and living with children.
I think it's just worth bearing in mind that the legal point of view you're working with here is very different, the one from what we have now to what's now being countenanced, because what you're doing here is you're saying, once there is a child born, you're acting in the interests of, in the pressing interests of the physical safety of a child. So you're saying, we're intervening because a child is in danger here. If on the other hand you're saying, we're going to take a course of action because we don't like the look of you, you're putting yourself into much more shaky legal ground and creating a precedent for doing all kinds of other things that say, we don't like the look of you.
David, why are the right wing so obsessed with the sex lives of the poor? What is it with this weird, myopic focus the right have on who the poor are having sex with? What is that about?
No, I don't.
What is that about?
Yeah, I think what it is something I mentioned earlier on, which is the scolding other people. You know, our society will be fixed if we fix them, if we fix them, if we fix them, if we fix them, and there's political traction in doing that. So it's and where it came unstuck was with that education policy, where suddenly people realised, oh God, they're talking about me now, so I don't like this anymore.
Final question to both of you. Is Michael Law's Talk Hate radio show the obvious medium for a rational debate on policy? Well, is it the one that jumps to mind first?
I'd just like to say that the right do not have a preoccupation with the poor.
They seem to. They've got a really weird focus.
But what I think that this national government is very bold at making, taking hard line and looking at the harder issues and actually asking the questions and going into debates about this. So by Paula raising this issue, the Minister raising this issue, is allowing it to go out into the community so that it can be debated. Let's face it, the Labor government did not ask any of these hard pressing questions. They swept them under the mat, they chucked money at it, and then decided that, you know, well, we're not going to talk about it.
Is Michael Law's the kind of medium that automatically jumps to mind when you're going to have a rational debate about any social policy whatsoever?
Well, in the absence of Paul Henry. I mean, God almighty. But you know, maybe I'm unfair on the right when I say that they scold everybody, but I think it's equally unfair to say of the left that they chuck money at things. That's another way of putting that is actually giving case managers enough resources to do the job properly, which is really what certainly in Steve Mahari's time was what they were talking about.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3. The Greens are riding a wave of Labour Party incompetence to the giddy heights of double-digit public support. But how to be a real player and how do they get into government? David, no one has blunted Green aspirations more in the last 15 years than the Labour Party. Post-2014, how do the Greens wrestle with Labour to get a real green agenda on the table?
I'm not sure if I mentioned this the last time we were talking, but I've certainly been saying it in columns this year, or ever since the election actually, that says, look, it's every likelihood that the left bloc is has the chance to be bigger than the national vote, and that is coming to pass. And I've been saying, rather than this traditional idea of dog and tail that you look at with coalition partners, you really ought to see this as a kind of a shifting of the tectonic electoral plates here, where you've actually got, potentially for some long stretch of time, two parties of reasonable size, one bigger, one smaller. And it seems to me that if the one of them, the Greens, emphasises environment, and the Labour emphasises a sort of a 21st expression of workers' rights, but it has to be a 21st century expression because, as we've seen in the case of Ports of Auckland, the very word union just gives people the whole wrong idea. But if you talk about saying, do you feel like you're working longer for less? Do you feel like you're not getting the time with your kids you once did? Do you feel like you're not getting ahead? All of these things. Well, guess what? A union used to be able to take care of this, and you don't have that anymore. Our policies are going to be taking care of that. That's the kind of workers' rights message I'm suggesting Labour would be articulating, and Greens would be articulating. I don't mean that environmental. I don't mean that they would be exclusively those two things, but their emphasis would be on those two sides, and that means
they can cohabit.
Well, I think it does. You know, I mean, they're both talking about raising the entitlement age for superannuation. They're both talking about capital gains tax. They're both talking about R&D and innovation spending at a meaningful level. You know, what's not to like?
Claudette, Russell hinted at a wider definition of mining than many activists would support. And Green Party supporters are certainly environmental believers. How does the realities of power turn those believers from being a party's greatest asset to their most venomous critics?
Oh, look, you know, I think Labour is really shitting themselves. Really, they're very, very worried about where the Greens are positioning themselves. The Greens are positioning themselves just left of centre, and they're picking up all sorts of swing voters. They're picking up the blue, the green blues. They're picking up the disenfranchised Labour voters.
And Labour's not good at sharing power. They don't do sharing very well, do they?
You know, let's make no mistake about it. Russell Norman is looking very much like a very suited up centrist, and I think that he's gearing himself up to be, you know, the Minister of Finance. And you've also got good cop, bad cop in the co-leaders as well too. Metieri Atude is undoubtedly the bad cop, and Russell Norman is a statesman.
But their activists won't put up with too much of a deviation from the core beliefs.
Well, that's right, and I think that they have left their original true voters of the far left behind and moved more to the centre, which, you know, politically where they should be if they see themselves as a credible, you know, government party.
Final question, what's the biggest challenge for the Greens before 2014?
Well, it looks like plain sailing for them, frankly.
Is that good?
They're not doing much wrong, and they're getting great attention. And I think Metieri Atude is resonating really well with young people. That's really good.
Biggest threat?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, they are becoming the opposition.
Yes.
You know, even though Labour is larger, and but they've got a lot of problems, and they really need to hunker down and to strategise.
Could they cut a deal with National? Could National pull itself back?
Well, I mean, you're talking about the Greens. I mean, let's face it. It was the installation of state homes. That was the Greens, Green Party, and then picked up by the Māori Party as well too. You see Nikki Kaye working with Kevin Haig on the adoption bill as well too. So it's not as though that they can't.
That's right.
Work together. But whether, you know, they haven't signed the MOU yet. Greens and National. Whether or not they form some formal alliance, that is yet to be seen. But the true blue-green supporters of the old days, of the Sue
Yep,
Bradford's
yep.
time.
Walking. Let's wrap the show with final word. Claudette, your final word this week is?
I would like to have a really good conversation and debate around the numbers in schools, what that increase means, particularly for Māori in Pacifica and in South Auckland, where the school sizes are larger. Does that, is that going to have more of a negative impact on the learning ability of Māori and Pacifica at the moment? I also want to know, will that also have an impact on the types of charter schools that will roll out and how quickly those will, considering that there's a lot of Māori communities and a lot of Māori organisations that are wanting to take over those charter schools because they have no faith in the current system.
David, your final word this week is?
I was reading something in the New Yorker that was describing this fairly fanciful stuff about how you're going to take care of the heating of the planet by, among other things, running plastic hoses 5 miles up into the air, believe it or not, to try and shove particular combination of sulphur and something else to see if we can't just bring the temperature down a bit.
Yeah.
In the context of, and I was thinking, there are some terrific ideas here, and they're all as wacky as that. But as an aside, one of the scientists talking about it was saying if the permafrost melts and the CO2 that's
The methane.
in there gets out, sorry, you're right,
yeah.
the methane. She said it's game over.
Yeah,
And I was thinking,
yeah.
for God's sake, why are we not treating this like the looming disaster it is? We're not taking this nearly as seriously as we ought to be.
Yeah. Thank you, Claudette. Thank you, David. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word. So now as Nationals start to melt down from the weight of their unpopular neoliberal agenda to flog off our assets and cripple public education, out comes Paula just in time for a new round of raw meat social policy to dog whistle the troops. Bennett's new attack is to have the state decide which women can have children and which ones can't. Note the existing laws allow for the state to intervene and remove a child if the state sees evidence of abuse, but these powers go well beyond that. Paula wants to pass law that will see the state decide that a woman is guilty of pre-crimes and simply ban them from being allowed to have children altogether. The right wing seem to have a torrid fetish for the sex lives of poor people and beneficiaries. Apparently Paula Bennett spends all day long fantasising about how she can meddle in the sex lives of those less fortunate than her. It's reminiscent of how the SIS would spy on the sex lives of the Green Party members because apparently who Keith Locke was getting it on with was a national bloody security interest. Paula's fertility court just seems creepy, and deciding if a woman is a non-breeder based on pre-crimes just comes across a bit too 1984 meets Minority Report, doesn't it? If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded news citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Don't forget my new show, The Union Report, plays 8 p.m. Monday nights here on Triangle TV, the home of original public broadcasting. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more